Released back in 2011 in Asia and early 2012 in Europe, PlayStation Vita wasn't a big success. Unlike the console in my previous video, PS Vita online store is still alive and well. However, the actual console was proclaimed dead within like a year or two after its release. Poor sales of the console and the Sony's decision to stop making games internally for it was one of the major reasons why the PS Vita failed. In addition, PlayStation 4 release back in 2013 finally put the nail in the coffin of PS Vita. However, now in 2023, Vita is still alive and well, so should you consider buying it now? Well, let's find out. Hey everyone, it's Blade, and today I want to talk with you about PlayStation Vita and my own experience with it, and maybe this will help you with your own decision of buying it or keeping your wallet safe. I got my console back in 2012, when my parents were nice enough to bring me to Sin Lin Square in Singapore, which is one of the largest electronic markets in the world. Unfortunately, I do not remember the buying price, but they also decided to buy a couple of games for me, a carrying case, as well as a memory card. Because without it, you could not save your games, or even buy any games online and store it on PlayStation Vita. I'm sure because that was just a couple of months after the launch, they overpaid a bit, but the launch price in US was $299 US for the 3G variant and $249 for the Wi-Fi only. On the second generation of PlayStation Vita console, they did add internal memory, an astonishing 1 gig of it, so it didn't help you to actually store any games on it, but at least you could save your games without forcing to buy an over expensive memory card. So let's talk about the specs of the original PlayStation Vita. It had 5-inch OLED panel with 940 by 544 pixels. It had 4 PlayStation buttons. It had a D-pad, 2 analog joysticks, a touch panel at the back, which was advertised by Sony as touch both sides, twice the sensation. It was for France, so I can get that point. It also has a Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, some models had 3G, 2 whole cameras, one for selfies and one for back camera, which is a really poor quality. However, with the recent popularity of really bad quality pictures online using really old cameras for some reason, you can also be a cool kid on the block with your PlayStation Vita. The second generation of PlayStation Vita, which was small, it had a bit of a different look on it. It had a different plastic used in the external, and as well it had a couple of minor differences in terms of the hardware. It had an LCD screen instead of OLED, and if you think that OLED is much better than LCD, well, for new devices that's for sure, but for some reason OLED panel on the first PlayStation Vita was not the best quality, so the LCD panel on the second generation looks better for most of the people. The new D-pad buttons were also introduced in the slim version, however a lot of people say that the OG version has much better D-pad. Lack of 3G option was also introduction to the second generation of Vita. To be honest, I don't know many people who used 3G on the first one, so that was a cost cut and I'm fine with that. They changed their own charging cable to a micro USB. Thank you, Sony. That was necessary because the proprietary cables are always bad, in my personal opinion. And also 1 gig of internal memory that was really helpful. As well, the actual console was 20% slimmer and 15% lighter, hence it was called Slim. They also changed the design a bit of the console, and many people say that the build quality of the second generation is worse than the first one. The first one feels more premium. But the new colors were introduced, and to be honest, those colors look amazing, so I think that wasn't a big deal. One of my favorite options is the light blue. The only question that I have to Sony is why the front panel is white. For the red version, black version, gray version, you all have the same front and back cover, but for the light blue, for some reason, and I think the lime version, you decided to keep the white panel, which it doesn't look bad, but it does take away a bit of the charm. They do have the blue version, which is full-on blue. Well, at least thanks for that. So I think those were the main difference between the first generation of Vita and the second one. Well, I didn't talk about the port on the top of original PS Vita, but because it wasn't used, even though some people say that it was kind of video capable output, but it was never officially released by Sony, so none of the cables work. So they removed it and that's it, no one lost anything. So on the specs, the PS Vita wasn't bad. So why did it fail? Well, its main competitor So if the console wasn't as bad in terms of hardware and its only competitor was Nintendo 3D, why did it fail? Well, the main problem was Sony lost its interest in Vita really early on in its life. Only 2 years after its official release, Sony actually publicly said that they're not gonna make any more games for it, and they just left the fate of the games for the Vita on the indie publishers. Also, even less than 2 years after its release, Sony released PS4, which was a huge success, and looking at the numbers of PS Vita and PS4 sales worldwide, well, they knew that they have to focus on a different console. The other thing is proprietary cards and the charging port. Even though they fixed the cable and now you could use micro USB cable for the second generation of Vita, it was a bit late, and the added 1 GB of internal storage was not enough. So if they had a chance to switch it to micro SD, the same type of cards that is used everywhere, as well as its main competitor used the micro SD cards, well, probably they had a better success. In order to buy PlayStation Vita's memory card, you have to spend a ton of money. On its release, the starting price for the 4 gigs memory card was $29.99 US. But 4 gigs was not enough. Well, you could save like one game, because average game on PS Vita is around 3 to 2 gigs. And you also have to consider that the whole application suite of the device has to be stored on that card because it didn't have any internal memory. So if you wanted to actually buy digital games, you had to buy at least 16 gigs memory card, which was $69.99. And that's not nice. That's too much money for a memory card. Because if you want to buy a digital game and install it, well, at least have like 4 or 5 games locally stored on your console, because back in the days Wi-Fi wasn't so fast, and even now PS Vita doesn't support 5 GHz Wi-Fi modules, so you have to use the 2.4, which is slower. And imagine you want to download the Need for Speed, which is 3 gigs, let's say, I don't know, Persona 4, 3 gigs, Killzone, 3 gigs, then Gravity Rush, 3 gigs, something else, and that's it. Like your memory is full. Charging port, as I mentioned before, it was proprietary, but you had an option to charge it from a different brick because the actual cable from USB-A to the PS Vita connector was detachable, so at least thank you for that. But as I mentioned before, the second generation of Vita had it fixed with the micro USB cable. And probably the most important problem with Vita was the lack of games on the launch. Well, on the actual launch day, you had like 5 games, out of which you had Wipeout 2048 and Uncharted, which were big franchises of Sony. Well, apart from that, there were like 10 titles from other developers like Rayman Origins, or I don't remember, what was the other game? FIFA? Yeah, I mean, some people buy FIFA every year, so FIFA, yeah, we can count FIFA as also a launch day PS Vita game. And other games, well, probably you had your favorite game on the launch day. I didn't, and I only had Wipeout and Uncharted. For sure, down the line, several good games were released on PlayStation Vita, such as Gravity Rush and Persona 4, and a lot of people still say that PS Vita is Persona console. But that wasn't enough. And even though the hardware specs were not bad on the Vita, PlayStation could not port their PS4 games on that console. In addition to PS4 being like the latest and newest home console and PS Vita was a portable one, the best thing that they could do is the remote play, which I think is still supported. So if you have your PS4 at home and you connect on the same Wi-Fi with PS Vita, you can go around the house and play your PS4 games on your PS Vita, which is cool. But when you try to play the actual games on Vita's hardware, even the first day titles like Killzone, it runs not really good. Probably the last thing that killed Vita back in the days is the rise of mobile gaming. Because Vita didn't have really graphically powerful games on there, a lot of people compared it to their iPhones or Androids or even tablets. And in 2013 and 14, you have to remember that games like Real Racing 3, Infinity Blade 3, and even GTA San Andreas was ported on those mobile devices. And if you knew that you already have something in your pocket that you carry all day with you that could play games that look sometimes better than the games on the $300 console, well, you wouldn't buy it. Unfortunately, a couple of years later, most of the mobile gaming just went into free-to-play garbage, so Vita was not successful in its own time frame. Look at Switch. Some games are ported in there because Nintendo wants it, and Nintendo wants Switch to succeed, therefore you can play Witcher 3 on it. It looks bad, it runs really bad, and it's just bad. If you want to get a Switch, get it only for indie games and for Nintendo exclusives. Press the like button if you're waiting for the new Zelda. Probably when the video is out, the actual Zelda is out too, but anyways, press the like button if you have Switch and you're gonna play this game. And the end of the days of Vita was on March 1st, 2019, when Sony stopped the production. So now it's 2023. Why you might be interested in getting a Vita? I know I did a previous video about the Nintendo 2DS XL, and I did not recommend that console for anyone who is looking purely for emulation. So if you're looking into playing any recent DS, recent to the launch date of Nintendo DS, if you're looking into those kind of games, for sure, go ahead and run and get that console. If you're looking for emulation, that's not a good device. But PlayStation Vita is a bit different, so let me tell you why. First of all is the lack of region lock. So it doesn't matter where you get your PS Vita from, which country, it will still run your official game cartridges from anywhere. On DS, you have region lock, so if you buy the Nintendo DS LL from overseas in Japan and import it here in North America, you are not able to play your physical games unless you homebrew the console. The second reason is the great amount of indie games available on PlayStation Vita right now, which you can still buy legally from the PlayStation Store, which is still working, even though Sony wanted to close it down, I think it was 2021, but they decided to keep it open for PS Vita and PS3, so if you want to support your indie devs, go ahead and buy the game. The games like Hotline Miami 2, Papers, Please, Spelunky, and Undertale. And the good reason buying games on PlayStation Vita is, for example, in Hotline Miami 2, if you purchase it on Vita, you can play it on your PS4 and PS3 too. I'm not sure about PS5, I haven't tried it, but the fact that you buy a single game and it plays on several consoles is kind of the same way as you have with Steam Deck. You get it for your deck and you can play it on your PC or on your deck. Another reason is the actual homebrew process of Vita is as simple as it could get. If we go back like half a year ago, it was a bit challenging to do it nice, but right now you just go on the website, press a couple of buttons, and then just spend like 10 to 20 minutes installing like some other apps, and that's it. You have a homebrewed console that can do a lot of stuff. Of course, because it's a next generation of PSP, PS Vita can emulate a lot of PSP games. Because I was a PSP kid back in the days, I can play my favorite PSP games on the Vita, and that's great, like one console for both of the generations. I can play Midnight Club Dub Edition 3, which was one of my favorite games back in the day. Of course, you can also emulate a couple of PSX games. Like, you could find a bit of a hiccups in one or other game. Some games were even released officially. Some games need to be emulated through Homebrew, but still you have this option to emulate PlayStation 1 games, as well as some other consoles, because this console has a lot of inputs. It allows you to play many different consoles, and it actually does it well. The only thing you have to look into the actual performance, but the price of PS Vita is much better than the price of Nintendo DS, so that is the major point. On average, you can find a good condition PS Vita for 150 Canadian dollars, which is $125 US right now. And if you look at the Nintendo DS market, well, the new 2DS XL used will be at least $150 or $160 US, making PS Vita cheaper. Therefore, there is no big reason of buying an emulation console for $150 if you're a fan of PlayStation titles, and everything that is available right now on PlayStation Store for Vita, there is a good chance that you will love this console. So overall, I want to say that if you like PSP titles, if you like PS Vita titles, some PlayStation 4 titles, and if you're overall a person who likes Sony titles from back in the days, PS Vita is a must-have. There's no point of purchasing PSP right now unless you're looking for using the old discs or if you just want a hardware collection. So PS Vita is like a 2 consoles in one, and the prices are good for it. The build quality of the first OLED version is good. Some people say that the second generation is not as good, but still it's good. At least it's not clamshell design, so you will not have the shaken screen the same way you have it on the Nintendo DS consoles. Sony, even though some people don't like this company, it still allows you to legally acquire the games for its consoles. Even though this console was released a long time ago, it's more than 10 years ago. And you can still buy legally the games for that console. If you're still looking for just emulating all over the place, like any kind of a console, and you don't have a preference, of course go ahead and buy a specific emulation console. If you are a person who loves a lot of Nintendo titles, go and get Nintendo 2DS XL, which is a bit on the pricier side. If you like PSP titles, PS Vita titles, and indie games, go ahead and buy PS Vita. So before I end this video, I just wanted to say a big thank you to everyone who likes the videos, who puts the comments, who dislikes the video, and who subscribes to the channel, because I recently hit 100 subs here, and it's just great news. It's really nice to see that if you try something and you spend time on it, people actually acknowledge it and spend their own time to see and even talk with me in the comments. So I really appreciate every single one of you, and yeah, go ahead, send me a message on Twitter, or even leave a message in the comment section in the video if you have any questions. I have several consoles, I have a PC, so even though if it's not this video related, feel free to send the message in the comments down below. And I also had a really great time making this video because it just brought back me in those times when I had the PS Vita, because with Nintendo DS I purchased it recently, so I didn't have any childhood memories. I had the Game Boy Advance back in the days, but PS Vita is a console that I still care. This is my console that I got from my parents back in 2012, so it brought all of those memories, the memories of those trips with my parents. So it was really nice to make this video for you, and I hope you enjoyed it. So now go play some games.